Hey guys, tonight we are journeying back to the 14th century, to the heart of what was then one of the wealthiest empires on earth, the Mali Empire in West Africa. We were about to witness what might be the single greatest flex in human history, an act of such staggering opulence that it literally broke the economy of every city it touched. And a little heads up, if you were actually dropped there, with the heat, the unfamiliar customs, and the sheer scale of it all, you might not last the first day. So good thing this is just a story. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. While you're at it, drop me a comment and let me know what city you're listening from, and what time it is for you. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing that hits you is the light. It's a brilliant, almost white-hot glare reflecting off the ochre-colored earth. The air is thick, dry, and carries a symphony of smells. The sharp tang of spices you can't name, the sweet scent of roasting meat, the earthy aroma of thousands of people in their livestock, and underlying it all, the clean, mineral smell of dust. You're standing on the edge of a vast, sprawling city. This is Niamey, the capital of the Mali Empire, though if you were to ask a historian today exactly where on a modern map you are, they'd likely launch into a very long, very polite argument. The precise location of this legendary capital remains one of the great, tantalizing puzzles of West African history, with scholars pointing to different sites in what is now Guinea or Mali. But for you, right now, it is undeniably real. The buildings are not the stone castles you might imagine from medieval Europe. They are magnificent structures of bunco, or rammed earth, their thick, reddish-brown walls keeping the interiors cool. Some are round with conical thatched roofs, others are rectangular and flat-topped. The skyline is a jumble of organic shapes, punctuated by the slender minarets of mosques piercing the impossibly blue sky. You drift into the river of people flowing towards the central market. The crowd is a dazzling tapestry of humanity. Merchants with shrewd eyes and elaborate turbans haggle in a dozen different languages. Soldiers, tall and imposing in their dyed cotton tunics, carry spears and large shields made of hide. Their casual confidence tells you this is a city at peace, secure in its power. You see women gliding by, their bodies wrapped in bolts of stunningly patterned fabric, their wrists and necks adorned with beads of glass, stone, and, you notice with a jolt, gold. Gold. It's everywhere. It's not just currency, hoarded away in vaults. It's a casual statement of wealth. You see a nobleman ride past on a fine horse, the bridle and saddle shimmering with golden studs. The hilt of his sword is solid gold. Even the threads in his grand BOU, his flowing robe, seem to catch the sun with a metallic glint. This is the empire's lifeblood. For centuries, the Mali Empire has controlled the three great gold mines of West Africa, making it the primary source of this precious metal for much of the known world, from Europe to the Middle East. As you wander deeper into the city's heart, the low, persistent hum of conversation seems to follow you. It's a buzz of excitement, a rumor being passed from stall to stall, from courtyard to courtyard, growing with each retelling. You pause near a well, pretending to be interested in a merchant selling kola nuts, and you listen. The Mansa he has made his decision. One man whispers, his eyes wide, to Mecca. Another asks, his voice hushed with awe. Yes, the great had. They say he will take the entire court. The musicians, the scholars, his wives, and the gold. A third man chimes in, his voice barely audible. They say the amount of gold he plans to take could buy Egypt. All of it. This is the source of the city's electric energy. The emperor, the Mansa, is about to embark on his pilgrimage. As you process this, you witness a strange and humbling ritual. A high-ranking official, flanked by attendants, walks down the street. As he passes, commoners instantly drop to their knees, bowing so low their foreheads touch the ground. They then scoop up handfuls of dust and pour it over their own heads and shoulders. It's a profound sign of respect and submission, a uniquely West African custom that shocks many foreign visitors. It's a reminder that for all the gold and commerce, this is a society built on a rigid hierarchy, all culminating in a single, almost divine figure, the emperor. You haven't seen him yet, but you can feel his presence everywhere, in the people's reverence, in the soldiers' pride, and in the sheer, unadulterated wealth that drips from every corner of his capital. The air is thick, not just with dust and spices, but with anticipation. A river of gold is about to be unleashed upon the world. The energy of the city pulls you from the chaotic marketplace towards its serene, imposing heart. You find yourself standing before the walls of the royal palace complex. This isn't a single building, but a city within a city, enclosed by thick, high walls of that same reddish-brown rammed earth. The guards here are different. They are the Mansa's elite, the sofa, and they stand motionless, their faces impassive, their spears glinting in the sun. There's an unspoken rule here. The closer you get to the Mansa, the quieter and more deliberate everything becomes. You manage to find a place in a dusty courtyard where the emperor is holding a public audience. A dying. It's less of a throne room and more of an open-air court of justice. Petitioners, merchants, and regional chiefs are gathered, all maintaining a respectful distance. And then, you see him, seated on a raised platform covered in rich carpets as Mansa Musa. He is not what you might have imagined. Forget the European image of a king, weighed down by a heavy metal crown and fur-lined robes. Musa is a strong, composed man, likely in his early 40s. He is described by chroniclers who would later hear tales of him in Cairo as being of noble bearing, with a handsome, brown-skinned face and a full beard. He wears a simple, immaculately white tunic and trousers made of fine spun cotton. On his head is a small, golden skull cap, and in his hand he casually holds a short bow, a symbol of his royal authority. The real spectacle is not the man himself, but the aura of power that surrounds him. He sits on a PMPI, a three-tiered throne, shaded by a single large silk parasol, a symbol of royalty. Topped with a golden bird, he is flanked by hundreds of soldiers and servants. When he speaks, you notice another peculiar custom. He doesn't raise his voice. He murmurs almost inaudibly to a figure standing just below him. This figure, known as a Jeli or Griot, is the emperor's official spokesman and oral historian. After listening to the man's quiet words, the Jeli turns to the petitioner and bellows the emperor's judgment, his voice echoing across the courtyard. It's an act of political theater, designed to elevate the Mansa beyond the realm of ordinary men. He doesn't speak to you. He speaks, and his word is made manifest for you. Later, as the audience concludes and the crowd disperses, you linger near a shaded wall. An old man with cataract-clouded eyes and the intricate scarification of a high-born elder on his cheeks is speaking to a young boy, perhaps his grandson. You lean in, catching the rhythm of his story. He is telling the boy how this Mansa Musa came to power, and it's not the story you'd expect. He was not born to rule. You see, the old man says, his voice a dry rustle. He was not the son of the Mansa before him. No, his path was unexpected. Mansa Musa, the storyteller explains, was the grandnephew of the empire's founder, the legendary Sunday Adekata. The throne, however, was occupied by his predecessor, Mansa Abukaburai. And Abukaburai was a different kind of ruler. He wasn't obsessed with gold or land, but with the sea. He was consumed by a single, burning question: what lay on the other side of the great Atlantic Ocean? First, the old man recounts, Abukaburai commissioned a fleet of 200 ships, crewed by the best sailors and supplied with enough food, water, and gold to last for years. He gave them one command: sail west and do not return until you have found the end of the ocean, or run out of supplies. A long time passed. Finally, a single, battered ship returned, The captain told the Mansa that the other ships had been caught in a great current, a river in the middle of the sea, and were swept away, never to be seen again. Undeterred, Abukaborai decided this was a journey he had to make himself. He ordered the construction of a new, even grander fleet, 2,000 ships, 1,000 for the explorers, and 1,000 for supplies. He gathered his scholars, his artists, and his best navigators. Then he did something unprecedented. He abdicated his throne. He appointed Musa, his trusted deputy, as regent, to rule in his stead until he returned. Then, with all the fanfare of a king going to war, Mansa Musa sailed west into the endless blue, leaving Musa in charge of the empire. He was never seen again. Whether his fleet found a new world, as some modern theorists passionately argue, or was simply claimed by the vast, unforgiving ocean, is a mystery that even the greatest historians of the age couldn't solve. It became a ghost story whispered in the halls of power. So, Mansa Musa, the man you just saw, is a king by default. He is the steward of a throne left vacant by a dreamer. And this pilgrimage, you realize, is about more than just faith. It's his chance to finally, definitively, step out of his predecessor's colossal shadow. Abukaborai chased the horizon. Mansa Musa would turn his gaze to the known world and show it a display of power and wealth so profound that no one would ever again question who the true Mansa of Mali was. The journey to Mecca was about to become the ultimate coronation. To truly understand the scale of the journey Musa is about to undertake, you need to see where the wealth comes from. It isn't minted in a royal treasury or dug from a single vast pit. It bleeds from the very land itself. A few days later, you find yourself tagging along with a caravan of merchants heading south, away from the capital, towards the gold fields. The landscape changes. The dry savanna gives way to a greener, more humid woodland. The air grows thick and heavy. You are entering the Bambuke region, one of the 3 legendary gold sources controlled by the Mali Empire. Along with Burungale, you don't find a mine in the way you might picture one. No deep shafts or sprawling complexes. Instead, you arrive at a wide, slow-moving river. The mining is done by local villagers, entire families working along the riverbanks. They are panning for alluvial gold. The tiny flakes and nuggets washed down from their source rocks over millennia undeposited in the river sediment. You watch as women wade into the shallow water, scooping up gravel and sand in large, calabash gourds. They swirl the contents with an expert, almost hypnotic motion. The lighter sand and dirt wash over the side, leaving behind a small, glittering residue of heavy gold dust. It's a slow, painstaking process that has been practiced here for centuries. Further from the river, you see men digging. They sink narrow pits, just wide enough for one person, into the red earth. They follow the veins of gold-bearing quartz, chipping away at the rock and the cracked oak shafts. The work is dangerous and exhausting, but the reward is immense. An Arab traveler named al-Bakri, writing centuries before Musa's time, described the locals finding nuggets so large they were like stones, with one famous story telling of a nugget the size of a large rock that the king used as a tether for his horse. While likely an exaggeration, it speaks to the incredible richness of this land. The Mali Empire didn't so much mine the gold as it controlled the people and the trade routes that came out of the gold fields. This is a crucial distinction. The kings of Mali were famously superstitious about the source of the gold, believing that if they ever took direct control of the mines, the gold spirits would be angered and the supply would dry up. So they taxed the trade instead, letting the local chiefdoms manage the extraction. It's here, at the edge of the forest, that you witness one of the strangest and most fascinating economic practices in history, the silent trade or dumb barter. You follow the merchants to a designated clearing. They lay out their goods in neat piles along the riverbank, shining blocks of salt from the Sahara, fine textiles, copper ingots, and glass beads. Once their wares are displayed, they beat a large drum, a signal that the market is open, and then retreat several miles into the forest, completely out of sight. Hours pass. Then, From the dense foliage on the other side of the river, figures emerge. These are the gold miners, the people who live in the forest and rarely interact directly with the outside world. They are famously shy of outsiders. They approach the merchant's goods, inspect the piles of softened cloth, and then place a corresponding amount of gold dust next to each pile they are interested in. Then, they to retreat back into the woods. The next day, the northern merchants return. They examine the gold left for them. If they are satisfied with the amount, they take the gold, beat the drum again, and leave, leaving their goods behind. If they feel the offer is too low, they simply retreat again without touching the gold, and the forest dwellers will return to add more. This back and forth can go on for days, a negotiation conducted in complete silence, with neither party ever meeting face to face. Historians still debate the exact reasons for this peculiar system. Was it a way to overcome language barriers between diverse groups, a ritual to appease local spirits? Or was it a clever tactic by the gold producers to protect the secret locations of their mines from the powerful northern traders? Whatever the reason, it worked. For centuries, it was the primary mechanism for getting West African gold into the vast trade networks that crossed the Sahara. As you watch the merchants pack up their newly acquired gold, not in chests, but in hollowed-out feather quills or small leather pouches, you have a profound realization. The gold you saw in me and I, the casual adornments and the rumored tons being prepared for the Hajj, all begins here. It starts with a family swirling mud in a gourd, a man chipping away at rock in a dark pit, and a silent, almost ghostly, exchange at the edge of a forest. This raw, elemental wealth is about to be refined, consolidated, and then unleashed on the world by a king determined to make a statement. The quiet glitter in the mud is about to become a roar that will echo across continents. You return to the capital, Neo, and the city is almost unrecognizable. The low hum of rumor you heard before has grown into a deafening roar of organized chaos. The day of departure is clearly approaching, and the sheer logistics of what Mansa Musa is attempting are laid bare before you. The entire city seems to be a staging ground. In a vast, dusty plain on the outskirts, a city of tents has sprung up. This is where the bulk of the caravan is assembling, and the numbers are staggering. Arab chroniclers who would later document the event, like Al-Umarayan Ibn Khaldun, would record figures that seem like pure fantasy, and modern historians still argue about the exact size. But even the most conservative estimates are mind-boggling. We're talking about a procession of some 60 Sahara people. This isn't just a royal entourage. It's a mobile nation. You wander through the camp, a disorienting maze of activity. There are the soldiers, maybe 12, gyro of them, fully armed. They are not just for show. The long journey through the desert and into foreign lands is fraught with peril from bandits, unrivaled chieftains. There are the civilians, courtiers, officials, merchants, cooks, and artisans. And then there are the slaves. You see at least 500 of them, and they are not in chains, but are finely dressed in brocaded Persian silk. They walk ahead of the man's personal retinue, and each one carries a staff, a heavy staff. You get a closer look and your breath catches. The staffs are made of pure, solid gold, each one weighing somewhere between 5 and 6 pounds. This is not cargo. This is walking, talking treasury, a deliberate, jaw-dropping display of disposable wealth. But the human element is almost overshadowed by the animal one. The air is filled with the groaning, bubbling complaints of camels, thousands of them. The official accounts speak of 80 to 100 camels whose sole purpose is to carry the gold. You see them being loaded, not with coins or bars, but with sacks filled with MITHQLs of TBR, unworked gold dust. Each sack weighs a staggering amount, hundreds of pounds of pure gold. You do a quick, rough calculation in your head, and the numbers become meaningless, like trying to count the stars. It is, by any measure, tons of gold. Beyond the gold camels, there are thousands more for supplies. This moving city needs to eat. They are loaded with sacks of rice, millet, and dried fruit. There are live animals, goats, sheep, and cattle, being herded along, a mobile food source. Giant water skins, smelling of tanned leather, are filled and stacked, a precious defense against the coming desert. You notice a group of men who seem different from the rest. They are not warriors or laborers. They are scholars, poets, and doctors, their hands stained with ink, not dirt. Musa is taking his entire intellectual court with him. This journey is not just a demonstration of wealth, but also of culture. He intends to show the learned men of Cairo and Mecca that the Mali Empire is not some backwater of uncivilized gold diggeress, but a center of Islamic scholarship and art. And then there's the man's personal retinue. His senior wife, the Empress Sinari Kunate, has her own entourage of 500 serving maids. His musicians, the Jaiyalis, there was their Kiores, the beautiful 21st-stringed lute harps, and their bolophones, a type of wooden xylophone. Their music, a constant, rippling melody, is the soundtrack to this monumental preparation. It's meant to announce the man's presence wherever he goes. One of the strangest sights is the royal baggage train. It includes not just chests of fine clothes and ceremonial weapons, but also mosque furnishings. Musa plans to build a new mosque every single Friday of his journey, no matter where he is. He is packing the very idea of his empire, its faith and its power, to be planted like seeds across the African continent. This detail, of building a mosque every Friday, is one of those facts that floats between history and legend. While perhaps not literally true for every single week of a year-long journey, the fact that the story exists tells you everything you need to know about the intention behind the pilgrimage. It was a holy mission, but it was also a branding exercise on an imperial scale. Standing there, amidst the dust, the noise, the smell of animals and cooking fires, you feel an overwhelming sense of insignificance. You are a tiny speck in the largest and wealthiest caravan the world has likely ever seen. It's a logistical nightmare, a king's glorious, pious, and fantastically arrogant dream taking physical form, and it is about to start moving. The sheer inertia of it all is terrifying and thrilling. The river of gold is ready to flood its banks. The morning of departure arrives not with a grand trumpet blast, but with a slow, building momentum, like a tide turning. Before the sun has even breached the horizon, the camp is alive. The air, cool for now, is thick with the sounds of thousands of people and animals waking up. The low groans of camels, the bleating of goats, the murmur of prayers, and the sharp commands of caravan leaders cut through the pre-dawn gloom. You find a spot on a small hill overlooking the plain, wanting to see the whole spectacle unfold. As the first rays of light paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, the caravan begins to move. It doesn't start all at once. It begins in sections, a colossal organism stirring to life. The vanguard moves first, a contingent of several thousand soldiers, their spears creating a forest of sharpened points against the rising sun. They are the ones who will clear the path, scout for water, and secure the resting places for the night. Then comes the heart of the procession. You see the 500 slaves, each holding their staff of solid gold. They march in a precise, practiced formation, a shimmering, walking colonnade of wealth. The sheer audacity of it is breathtaking. This is wealth so immense it can be used for something as mundane as a walking stick. Behind him, surrounded by his personal guard, rides Mansa Musa. He is on a magnificent horse, not a camel, adorned with the finest tack from the Sahara. His presence is calm and commanding amidst the swirling chaos. He is the quiet center of this storm of humanity. Following the Mansa is the main body of the caravan. The endless line of camels, laden with golden provisions, stretches for as far as the eye can see. They move with a slow, swaying gait, their bells creating a constant, hypnotic chiming. Interspersed between them are the thousands of civilians, the courtiers in their fine robes, the merchants leading their own private pack animals, the families of the soldiers and servants. It's a river of people, a flowing, multicolored stream of humanity that seems to have no end. You decide to join them. Slipping down from your vantage point, you emerge into the slow-moving crowd. The scale of it is even more overwhelming from within. You are just one person among 60. Zeroth, to your left, a group of women are balancing baskets of provisions on their heads, chatting and laughing as if they were merely walking to the local market. To your right, a blacksmith is leading a donkey that carries his bellows and anvil, prepared to make repairs on the road. This is a city on the move, and it has brought all its functions with it. The dust is immediate and all-encompassing. The feet of thousands of people and animals kick up a fine red powder that coats your skin, your clothes, and the back of your throat. The sun climbs higher, and the heat begins to build. A relentless, pressing weight. You realize the journey has only just begun, and it is already an endurance test. You walk for hours. The great city of neon eye recedes behind you, its familiar shapes dissolving into the hazy distance. The landscape is a rolling savanna, dotted with acacia trees and giant, otherworldly baobabs. The caravan doesn't follow a straight line. It snakes and curves, following the contours of the land. A massive, human serpent crawling across the face of West Africa. As midday approaches, the lead scouts signal a halt. The spot has been chosen, a cluster of shade trees near a shallow, seasonal riverbed where water can be dug for. The efficiency with which the mobile city sets up camp is remarkable. Within an hour, tents are pitched, fires are lit, and the smell of cooking food begins to drift through the air. The animals are laid to water, and a perimeter is established by the soldiers. The chaos has a rhythm, an established order that has been perfected over centuries of trans-Saharan trade, though never on this scale. You sit in the shade of a large tamarind tree, watching a jay attune his kora. He plucks a few strings, the notes clear and sweet in the hot air. He begins to sing, his voice a powerful tenor. He isn't singing about the future or the destination. He is singing the epic of Sahara, the story of the founding of this very empire, connecting the present moment to the legendary past. It's a reminder to everyone listening, from the lowest servant to the emperor himself, that they are part of a long and glorious history. This journey is just the next chapter. The scale of the caravan is so vast that it's impossible to see both the front and the back at the same time. One historian famously wrote that when the vanguard of the caravan was entering one town, the rear guard was still leaving the previous one. Whether this is literal truth or poetic license is, again, a point of academic discussion. But as you sit there, listening to the music, watching the smoke from 1,000 cooking fires curl into the sky, you believe it. You are inside something so large it defies easy comprehension. A river of humanity and gold that has just begun its long, inexorable flow towards the north. The days settle into a routine, a predictable rhythm that makes the immense scale of the undertaking manageable. Your life is now governed by the sun, the pace of the camels, and the needs of 60 souls. Each day begins in the pre-dawn chill. The first sounds are the calls to prayer, echoing from dozens of locations throughout the camp as Imes led the faithful. It's a soft, melodic start to the day. Then, the camp slowly rouses itself. Fires are rekindled not for warmth, but for the first meal, usually a simple porridge of millet or sorghum. Tents are struck, bed rolls are tied, and the camels are loaded with a practiced efficiency that wastes no movement. The groaning and complaining of the beasts is a constant morning chorus. By the time the sun is fully up, the caravan is moving again. You fall into your place within the vast human river. The social structure of Neon Eye has been perfectly replicated on the move. You see it in the way people walk and talk. The nobles and high-ranking officials ride near the Mansa, a core of power and privilege. The soldiers march in disciplined cohorts, their commanders shouting orders. The merchants, artisans, and their families form their own little communities within the larger whole, sticking together for familiarity and safety. Then there's the Mansa's court. He doesn't just travel. He holds court on the move. Each day, you see petitioners approaching his retinue. A regional chief needs to settle a dispute. A merchant has a grievance. The system of justice doesn't stop just because The capital is on the move. The J-E-I is always there. The booming voice that translates the emperor's quiet will into public decree. Justice is dispensed under the shade of an acacia tree with the same gravity as it was in the grand courtyard back in Neon Eye. The search for water is the central, unspoken anxiety of the day. The scouts, ranging far ahead, are the most vital part of the entire operation. Their knowledge of the landscape, of the secret wells in the seasonal riverbeds, is the difference between life and death. When they signal a water source, a ripple of relief passes through the entire column. The midday halt is a welcome respite from the oppressive heat. Under the brutal sun, the world seems to bleach out, all colors fading to white. People huddle in any patch of shade they can find. This is when the main meal is cooked and shared. The diet is simple but nutritious. Rice, millet, and occasionally goat or sheep stew for those of higher status. You learn to eat with your right hand from a communal bowl, a gesture of trust and fellowship. It's in the evenings, however, that the true character of the caravan emerges. As the sun sets, casting long shadows across the savannah, the camp transforms. 8,000 small campfires flicker to life, like a new constellation fallen to earth. The mood softens, the hardships of the day are forgotten, replaced by a sense of community. This is the time for stories. You find yourself drawn to a fire where a group of soldiers are gathered. They are not talking of war, but of home. They share jokes, complain about their commanders, and speak softly of the families they left behind. Elsewhere, you see a circle of women weaving intricate patterns into strips of cotton on a small, portable loom, their fingers moving with a blur of practiced skill. The most captivating evenings are those spent near the JELs. They are the living libraries of the empire. They don't just sing the epic of Santiago. They know the genealogies of every noble family, the history of every major battle, the laws and customs of the land. Listening to them is like watching history being woven in real time. They are entertainers, but they are also educators and political advisors. Their status is unique. They are both revered and, in some ways, feared for the power their knowledge holds. One of the strangest facts about the JEL is that they were part of a rigid caste system. You were born a JELI. You couldn't become one. Their knowledge was passed down from father to son, a sacred oral trust. As darkness falls completely, the stars come out with an incredible, piercing clarity you've never seen before, unobscured by the haze of any modern city. You lie on your simple bedroll, looking up at the vast, silent sky. The sounds of the camp a gentle murmur around you. You can hear the soft plucking of a coral from a nearby fire, the low murmur of conversation, the occasional laugh. You are part of a temporary, nodal world, a perfectly ordered society crawling across the continent. It's a world of immense wealth and power, but at night, under the stars, it is also a world of shared stories, quiet fellowship, and the simple, human need for connection in a vast and intimidating landscape. The landscape has been changing, slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. The scattered acacia and baobab trees have become sparser. Their leaves dust are and more brittle. The patches of dry grass have given way to rocky ground and, finally, to sand. The air itself feels different, drier, sharper, carrying a fine grit that stings your eyes and grates between your teeth. The caravan has reached the southern edge of the Sahara, the Sahara, which literally means shore in Arabic. You are standing on the shore of a vast, sandy ocean. The mood of the caravan shifts. The easy chatter of the savannah crossing is replaced by a quieter, more focused determination. This is the great test. The Sahara is not just an obstacle. It is a monster from myths and legends, a place that swallows armies and caravans whole. Your first encounter with the desert's most precious commodity comes not in the form of gold, but of salt. The caravan makes a stop at Taghosa, one of the most desolate and bizarre settlements on the planet. It is a city made almost entirely of salt. The houses are built from heavy blocks of salt, quarried from vast, sun-blasted salt pans. The roofs are covered with camel hides. Nothing grows here. All food, Every grain of millet has to be imported. The only reason people live in this relentlessly hostile environment is for the salt, which is cut from the earth in huge, crystalline slabs. You watch as the merchants in your caravan trade. Dear, gold is almost a secondary currency. The real business is trading the grain and cloth they've carried from the south for these heavy blocks of salt. In the forests and savanna you just left, salt is more than a seasoning. It's a vital preservative and a necessary nutrient for both humans and livestock, and it is incredibly scarce. In those regions, it was often said to be traded for its equal weight in gold. Historians still debate how literal this weight-for-weight exchange was. It likely varied by season and location, but it speaks to the immense value of this simple mineral. Dear, in the heart of the desert, you see the other side of that equation. As the caravan pushes deeper into the Sahara, life becomes a stark equation of survival. The days are a silent, shimmering ordeal. The heat is a physical presence, pressing down on you, leaching the moisture from your body. You learn to cover every inch of your skin, not for modesty, but to protect against the brutal sun and the dehydrating wind. The world is reduced to a palette of two colors, the endless beige of the sand and the piercing, metallic blue of the sky. The nights are the opposite. The temperature plummets, and the cold is sharp and biting. You huddle near the fires, wrapping yourself in every piece of cloth you own. The desert at night is profoundly silent, a silence so deep it feels like a pressure on your eardrums. The guides are now the most important people in the entire 60. They're a person procession, more so than the generals or even the courtiers. They are Tuareg Berber tribesmen, the blue men of the desert, so called for the indigo dye of their turbans that often stains their skin. They navigate not by maps, but by an ancient and intricate knowledge passed down through generations. They read the faint, almost invisible tracks in the sand, the position of the stars, the shape of certain rock formations, the subtle changes in the wind. To you, the landscape is a monotonous, featureless sea of dunes. To them, it is a network of invisible roads and signposts. You learn a new respect for the camel. These cantankerous, spitting animals are miracles of adaptation. They can drink astonishing amounts of water when it's available and then go for days without any. Their wide, splayed feet don't sink into the soft sand, and their long eyelashes protect their eyes from the constant grit. They are the ships of this desert ocean, and without them, this journey would be utterly impossible. One of the stranger, more niche facts you pick up from the cameleers is about camel milk. It's a staple of the desert diet, but it's famously low in fat, meaning it's almost impossible to churn it into butter. The journey is a relentless process of attrition. People get sick, animals weaken and die. The caravan leaves a trail of its losses behind in the sand, but it pushes on, a thin, fragile line of life in an ocean of death. Every sunset feels like a victory. Every sunrise is a new challenge. You are no longer in the Mali Empire, the land of gold and plenty. You are in a different kingdom now, a kingdom of sand, salt, and stars, and its ruler is survival itself. During one of the long, monotonous afternoons of the desert crossing, as you trudge through the endless sand, you find yourself walking alongside a man who commands a quiet, profound respect. He is not a warrior or a nobleman in the traditional sense. His name is Bala, and he is one of the Mansa's chief Jes. His role, you've come to understand, is far more complex than just being a musician or a storyteller. He is a living, breathing archive, in a society where written history is a relatively new undelete practice, largely confined to Islamic scholars. The Jes or griots, as they are often called in French, are the official custodians of the past. Their minds are the national library. They can recite, word for word, the epic poems that tell the story of their people. The Mandinka. They can trace the lineage of Mansa Musa all the way back to the first man. They know the laws, the proverbs, and the delicate social contracts that bind the empire together. You ask Bella, through a friendly merchant who can translate your clumsy attempts at mand, how he remembers it all. He smiles, the slow, patient expression. He explains that it is not about memorization in the way you understand it. It is a lifelong immersion. From the time he was a small boy, he sat at his father's feet, listening. He didn't just learn the words. He learned the melodies, the rhythms, the very cadence of history. The kura, the 24-string harp he carries so carefully, is not just an instrument for accompaniment. Its melodies are mnemonic devices, each musical phrase linked to a specific verse, a specific event, a specific king. He tells you about the training. A young JEL, I must learn thousands of proverbs, hundreds of songs, and the complete genealogies of the ruling families. It's a process that takes decades. He says that when an old JELI dies, it is as if a library has burned to the ground. This phrase, a library has burned down, is a famous West African proverb, and hearing it here, from a man who embodies the living library, sends a shiver down your spine despite the desert heat. One evening, by the light of a flickering campfire, you witness the full extent of his art. A minor dispute has broken out between two regional chiefs traveling with a caravan. It's a matter of land rights and historical precedent. Instead of a debate, the Mansa calls for valor. The JELI stands before the assembled nobles, his kora in his lap. He closes his eyes for a moment, and then his fingers dance across the strings, a cascade of shimmering notes that silences the count. He begins to chant, his voice a powerful, resonant baritone. He doesn't address the dispute directly. Instead, he begins the story of the chief's common ancestor. 3 generations back, he sings of the ancestor's great deeds, of the lands he conquered, and how he divided them between his sons. He sings of the promises made, the oaths sworn. He is not giving an opinion. He is summoning the past into the present, laying out the facts as they have been preserved in oral scripture for a century. The music rises and falls, the story weaving a complex tapestry of relationships and obligations. By the time he finishes, an hour later, the dispute has evaporated. The precedent is clear. The shared history he has invoked has reminded the two chiefs of their connection, their duties superseding their petty squabbles. It is a masterful display of judicial, historical, and artistic power all rolled into one. You realize that the JELs are not just entertainers. They are the glue that holds the social fabric of the empire together. Interestingly, for all their power and prestige, their social status is deeply ambiguous. A classic is it this or that debate for sociologists and historians. They are simultaneously revered and looked down upon. They belong to a specific, hereditary caste, and while they can advise kings, they can never rule. They are often wealthy, receiving lavish gifts for their performances, but they are also seen as dependents, reliant on the patronage of the noble families whose histories they preserve. They live outside the normal social hierarchy, a unique class of their own. One of the more peculiar tidbits you learn is about their burial customs. In some parts of the Mandinka world, it was considered taboo to bury a JELI in the earth, for fear that the ground would become barren. Instead, their bodies were often placed in the hollows of large baobab trees. The tree itself became their tomb, a living monument to the man who was a living library. As you drift off to sleep that night, the sound of a distant chorus still hanging in the air, you understand the Mali Empire a little better. Its power isn't just in its gold or its armies. It's in its stories. It's in the memory of men like Bala, who carry the weight of a nation on the strings of a harp in the tip of their tongue. After weeks in the desolate emptiness of the Sahara, a new sight appears on the horizon. It's not a mirage. It's a smudge of green, a promise of life. As you draw closer, the smudge resolves into the dark, feathery tops of date palms. You have reached one of the great oases of the Western Sahara. But this is more than just a watering hole. It is the legendary city of Walade. Today, Walade is a sleepy, remote outpost in modern-day Mauritania. A UNESCO World Heritage Site slowly being reclaimed by the desert sand. But in the 14th century, it is a bustling, vital metropolis. For centuries before the fame of Timbuktu eclipsed it, Walade was the main southern terminus of the trans-Saharan trade routes. It was the great gateway between the Arab and Berber world of North Africa and the Black African empires of the south. All the salt going south and all the gold going north passed through the hands of the merchants here. As the caravan streams into the city, you feel a palpable sense of relief wash over the thousands of travelers. Here, there are deep, cool wells. There is abundant shade. There are markets overflowing with fresh dates, melons, and grain. The city itself is a marvel of desert architecture. The buildings are constructed from rough stone and covered in a reddish-brown mud plaster, giving the city a warm, earthy glow. What strikes you most are the intricate decorations. The doorways and windows of the more important houses are painted with complex geometric patterns under rebuxes in white, red, and black. It is a splash of artistic expression against the monochrome backdrop of the desert. Mansa Musa and his court are welcomed with great ceremony by the city as governor. But Musa is not just here to rest and resupply. Waladi is a renowned center of Islamic scholarship, and he is here to learn and to recruit. You follow some of his entourage to the city's main mosque. It's a simple but beautiful structure. Its courtyard filled with men sitting in circles on woven mats. They are scholars, jurists, and theologians, deep in discussion. You see that learning here is a respected and valuable profession. The most prominent scholars are as revered as the wealthiest merchants. They are the masters of fiqh, Islamic jurisprudence, tafsir, Quranic exegesis, and astronomy. They are in constant contact with the great intellectual centers of the Islamic world, like Fez and Cairo. Books, which have to be painstakingly carried across the desert, are one of the most precious commodities in the city. A rare manuscript could be worth more than a slave. Mansa Musa spends several days here, not just resting, but engaging with these scholars. He sits with them, asks them questions about Islamic law, and listens to their debates. This is a key part of his mission. He wants to deepen his own understanding of the faith, but he is also talent scouting. He is looking for the brightest minds to bring back with him to Mali, to help him build his own centers of learning. You learn a fascinating and somewhat quirky detail about a Lotus society. According to the famous 14th century traveler Ibn Battuta, who would pass through here a couple of decades after Musa, the women of Waladi enjoyed a remarkable degree of freedom and respect that shocked him. He noted that the lineage was matrilineal, meaning descent was traced through the mother's side. Women were not secluded. They had friends and companions of the opposite sex who were not relatives, and they were highly educated and outspoken. Ibn Battuta, coming from a more conservative Moroccan background, was scandalized by this, but it points to the complex blend of Berber and West African traditions that created a unique local culture. Historians still debate how to interpret Ibn Battuta's sometimes judgmental accounts, but they offer a rare window into the social dynamics of the time. While the scholars debate theology, the merchants of the caravan are busy in the marketplace. This is a crucial stop for them to trade, rest their animals, and gather intelligence about the route ahead. The city is a dizzying crossroads of cultures. You see Berber nomads in their indigo veils, black-skinned Zorinke merchants from the south, and pale-faced Arab traders from the Mediterranean coast. They communicate in a mixture of Arabic, Berber, and Mand languages. It's a cosmopolitan hub, thriving on its position as the middleman in the continent's most lucrative trade. After a week of rest and intellectual exchange, the caravan prepares to leave. It is larger now. It has absorbed new merchants, new guides, and a handful of scholars who have been persuaded by the Mansa's promises of wealth and royal patronage to join him on his journey to Mecca and then back to Mali. Waladi has been a crucial stepping stone, a place to heal the wounds of the desert and to reinforce the caravan's purpose. It was an intellectual oasis as much as a physical one. As you leave the city's gates and turn your face towards the next vast stretch of desert, you realize the journey is not just changing the world it passes through. It's also gathering pieces of that world to take home. As the caravan presses on from Waladi, deeper into the vastness of the Sahara, you become acutely aware of the strange and self-contained economy that has developed within this mobile city. The 60 Zaro people on this journey are not just pilgrims. They are a functioning society, and a society needs a medium of exchange. Here, that medium is gold, but it's used in a way that is both incredibly lavish and surprisingly practical. You had seen the great sacks of gold dust, the TBR, being loaded onto the camel's back in Mionai. You had assumed this was the national treasury, to be presented to foreign kings or used for major purchases in the great cities of Egypt and Arabia. And it is, but you quickly discover that it is also the caravan's everyday currency. There are no coins. Bartering for small items is common, but for any service rendered, payment is made in pure gold dust. You watch, fascinated, as a soldier buys a handful of dates from a small-time merchant who has joined the caravan. The merchant pulls out a tiny, delicate set of scales. The soldier opens a small leather pouch he wears around his neck and carefully pours a tiny stream of glittering dust onto the scale until the merchant nods in satisfaction. The transaction is complete. This happens for everything. A man whose sandal has broken pays an artisan to repair it with a pinch of gold. A woman buys a small clay pot of ointment for her sunburnt skin and pays with gold. Even the water carriers, who perform the vital task of distributing the daily water ration, are tipped for their service in gold. It's a microeconomy running entirely on the most precious of metals. The official in charge of dispensing this gold is the Sarakuma, or the master of the purse. He is a high-ranking treasury official, and he is one of the most important men in the caravan. Every few days, he oversees the distribution of funds. You see the head of each section of the caravan, a military commander, the chief of a group of artisans, a senior courtier, lining up before the treasury tent. They present their needs, and the Sarakuma and his assistants carefully weigh out the required amount of gold dust from the huge reserve sacks. This gold is then used as the operating budget for their section, paying for wages, supplies, and incidental expenses. One of the most peculiar and talked about aspects of this system is how Musa himself uses gold. He seems to treat it with an almost casual disdain, as if it were an infinite resource. If he passes a group of Jaialis singing his praises, he will gesture to an attendant, who will scoop a cupful of gold dust from a nearby bag and shower it over the musicians. If a poor nomad approaches the caravan begging for alms, he is not given a crust of bread, but a handful of gold. This incredible generosity is a calculated political and religious act. In Islamic tradition, almsgiving, or zakat, is one of the 5 pillars of the faith. Musa is performing his religious duty on an imperial scale, but it is also a powerful statement of his status. It demonstrates that he is so wealthy, so blessed by Allah, that he can afford to treat the most sought-after substance on earth like common sand. You learn that this system, while dazzling, has its own problems. How do you ensure fair measurement? The quality and purity of gold dust could vary, though the Malian gold was famously pure, often called red gold for its color. The accuracy of scales could be disputed. Historians still ponder the intricate logistics of this system. It suggests a highly organized and trusted bureaucracy was in place to manage what could have easily descended into chaos and accusations of theft. It was a system built on a foundation of immense supply and established trust. One evening, you see one of the 500 slaves, the ones who carry the golden staffs, sitting by a fire, polishing his heavy baton. You approach him cautiously. He tells you his name is Musa, the same as the emperor. He explains that being chosen for this role was a great honor. He was selected from the royal household for his strength and loyalty. His staff is not just a burden, it is a symbol of the man's power, and he is its proud guardian. He tells you that when they reach the great cities, his role will be to stand, silent and imposing, a living testament to the wealth of his master. His story gives a human face to the abstract concept of the man's wealth. It's not just a number in a ledger. It's a 6-pound weight of solid gold that a man has to carry across a continent. This journey is stripping away your previous understanding of money and value. You are living in a world where the streets aren't paved with gold, but the salaries are paid with it. The tips are given in it, and the alms are showered in it. It's a strange, glittering, and utterly unsustainable economic bubble. floating across the most barren landscape on Earth. The desert, which had been a monotonous but predictable adversary, decides to show its true power. For days, the sky has been a strange, hazy yellow. The wind, once a steady, drying force, has become fitful and gusty, whipping sand into your face with stinging force. The senior guides, the tour, are visibly uneasy. They can turn low, urgent tones, constantly scanning the horizon. Then, one afternoon, the world changes. The sun, which had been a white-hot disk, dims and turns a sickly orange. The horizon, which had been a sharp line between sand and sky, disappears into a roiling, brownish-black wall that is rushing towards you with terrifying speed. A low moan begins to rise from the wind, growing quickly into a deafening roar. Phew. The cry goes up from the guides, a word of pure dread, bass and storm. There is no time to pitch tents or organize a proper camp. The commanders are shouting orders that are instantly snatched away by the wind. The world descends into a maelstrom of sand and noise. Visibility drops to near zero. You can barely see the person standing next to you. The air becomes so thick with sand that it's difficult to breathe. Each gasp is a mouthful of grit. The camels, with an instinct born of millennia in this environment, immediately drop to their knees, tucking their heads down and closing their inner eyelids. The humans follow their lead. You pull your turban and robes tight around your face, leaving only a tiny slit for your eyes, and huddle on the ground behind a kneeling camel, trying to make yourself as small a target as possible for the wind's fury. The storm is not just wind and sand. It is a sensory assault. The roar is constant, a physical pressure that vibrates through your entire body. The sand is not like a gentle dusting. It is a high-speed blast of fine particles that feels like being scoured with sandpaper. It finds its way into everything. Your clothes, your hair, your mouth, your ears, for what feels like an eternity. You can do nothing but endure. You are utterly powerless, a tiny, insignificant creature at the mercy of a monumental force of nature. All the gold, all the soldiers, all the royal authority of the Mansa, I mean nothing in the face of this. The caravan, that magnificent, moving city, is shattered into 60 harder terrified individuals, each fighting their own small battle for survival. You think about the wealth being carried by this caravan, the tons of gold dust, so carefully guarded. What good is it now? It is just heavy, useless metal. In this moment, a single skin of water is infinitely more precious than all the gold in Mali. It is a humbling, terrifying clarification of true value. The storm rages for hours. Time loses all meaning. There is only the roar of the wind and the suffocating darkness of the sand. You drift in and out of a state of numb endurance. This is how entire caravans are lost. You realize, buried and scattered, there remains not to be found for centuries. Then, as slowly as it began, the storm starts to recede. The wind's roar subsides to a howl, then a moan, then a whisper. The thick, brown fog of sand begins to thin. First, you can see 10 feet, then 50, then 100. The sun reappears, a pale, watery circle in the dusty sky. You shakily get to your feet, coughing up a thick paste of sand and saliva. The scene around you is one of utter devastation. The neat lines of the caravan are gone. The landscape has been transformed. Dunes have shifted, and familiar landmarks have vanished. The ground is littered with supplies that were torn from the backs of camels. People are scattered everywhere, dazed and disoriented, helping each other to their feet. The true cost of the storm becomes apparent as leaders take stock. Several people are missing, likely buried in the shifting sands. Dozens of camels, their legs broken or suffocated by the sand, are dead or dying. Precious sacks of food and, more importantly, water skins have been ripped open and lost forever. There is no great ceremony or speech from the Mansa. This is a moment for practical, grim work. The soldiers and guides begin the process of rounding up the scattered people and animals, gathering the salvageable supplies, and trying to re-establish some semblance of order. There is a quiet, somber mood. Nature has delivered a brutal reminder of who is truly in charge out here. Historians and chroniclers rarely dwell on these moments. They prefer to write about the glittering courts and the grand gestures. But these events undoubtedly happened. A journey of this length through the Sahara could not have been without such trials. The official narrative focuses on the triumph, but the reality was likely punctuated by moments of sheer terror and loss like this one. The academic debate isn't if such events occurred, but how frequently and with what severity, and how they shaped the psychology of the pilgrims. That night, the camp is subdued. The fires are smaller, cuddled. The usual storytelling is replaced by quiet, grateful prayers. You look at the faces around you, etched with exhaustion and caked in a fine layer of dust. They are the faces of survivors. The river of gold had been humbled, its arrogance scoured away by the wind. The journey to Mecca is not just a pilgrimage of faith and wealth, but a trial by fire, or in this case, by sand. The weeks following the sandstorm are a grim, determined slog. The caravan is wounded, its supplies diminished, its spirit chastened, but it pushes forward, driven by the sheer, stubborn will of its leader. And then, one day, the landscape begins to change again. You see a thin, green line on the far horizon. This time, it's not an oasis, but something more substantial. It's the fertile valley of the Nile. After months of trekking through the shades of brown, beige, and yellow that define the desert, the sudden explosion of green is an almost painful shock to the eyes. You are entering Egypt. The air becomes humid, thick with the smell of damp earth, river water, and growing things. You see fields of wheat, barley, and clover, meticulously irrigated by a network of canals drawing from the life-giving river. The people here are different. They are the Felahin, the peasant farmers of the Nile, whose ancestors have worked this land since the time of the pharaohs. They stop their work and stare in slack-jawed wonder as your colossal caravan streams out of the western desert. They have seen large trade caravans before, but nothing like this. This is an army, a city, a river of humanity and gold that seems to have materialized from the empty wasteland. The caravan doesn't march straight for Cairo. First, it must navigate the complex political landscape of Mamluk Egypt. This land is ruled by the Mamluk Sultanate, a powerful and sophisticated military dynasty. The Mamluks were originally slave soldiers, mostly of Turkic and Circassian origin, who seized power in the 13th century. They are renowned for being the ones who finally stopped the Mongol invasion of the Middle East, and they are fiercely proud and protective of their domain. Mansa Musa sends envoys ahead, carrying lavish gifts and a message of peace and piety. He is a brother in faith, a pilgrim on his way to the holy city of Mecca, and he seeks safe passage in the hospitality of the Sultan. The response is cautious but welcoming. The Sultan, Al-Nasir Muhammad, is an experienced and shrewd ruler, and the arrival of a mysterious king from the land of gold with an army at his back is both an opportunity and a potential threat. As you get closer to Cairo, the density of the population increases. You pass through town after town, each one larger and more prosperous than the last. The architecture is a world away from the rammed earth structures of Nianai. Here, you see stone buildings, multi-story houses with intricate wooden lattice screens called mashrabia on the windows, and the soaring domes and minarets of countless mosques. The approach to Cairo is overwhelming. It is, at this time, one of the largest and most magnificent cities on earth, far bigger than any city in Europe. Its population is a swirling vortex of Arabs, Turks, Nubians, Berbers, and Europeans. The noise is a constant din of vendors shouting, donkeys braying, and the call to prayer echoing from 100 different minarets. The caravan sets up its main camp on the outskirts of the city, near the Great Pyramids of Giza, which are already ancient wonders by this time. To your companions from Mali, who have never seen such massive stone structures, they are a source of endless awe and speculation. Are they mountains? Storehouses built by a prophet? The debate provides a welcome distraction. One fascinating but often overlooked detail is the logistical challenge of this arrival. How do you feed and water 60 Sahara people and thousands of animals on the edge of an already crowded metropolis? Local merchants, their eyes wide with the prospect of immense profit, descend on the camp. Prices for grain, fodder, and meat skyrocket overnight. This is the first small economic tremor that the caravan causes. A tiny preview of the earthquake to come. Mansa Musa himself does not immediately enter the city. Protocol must be observed. He remains in his lavish tent, receiving visitors and sending diplomatic feelers. The air is thick with anticipation. The two most powerful rulers in Africa are about to come face to face. One is the master of the ancient, sophisticated, and scholarly heartland of Islam. The other is the master of the mysterious, fabulously wealthy lands of gold to the south. You stand at the edge of the camp, looking out over the Nile Delta on one side and the eternal pyramids on the other. Behind you lies the Sahara, a trial you have survived. Ahead of you lies Cairo, the glittering, chaotic heart of the Mamluk Empire. You have journeyed from one world into another. The quiet, inward-looking power of the Mali Empire is about to collide with the loud, cosmopolitan, and commercial power of Egypt. The stage is set for one of the most remarkable encounters in medieval history. The news of your caravan's arrival spreads through Cairo like wildfire. It's not just the size of the entourage that has the city buzzing. It's the stories. Tales of the king from the south, the Mansa of Mali, are on everyone's lips in the markets and bathhouses. They speak of his piety, the discipline of his soldiers, and above all, his wealth. But these are just rumors. The city is about to witness the reality, and it's far more extravagant than any rumor could suggest. Mansa Musa finally makes his grand entrance into Cairo. It is a masterfully staged piece of political theater. He doesn't ride at the head of a conquering army, but as a humble pilgrim who happens to be surrounded by an astonishing display of wealth. The 500 slaves, clad in their finest silk, lead the procession, each holding their 6-pound staff of solid gold, which glints and flashes in the bright Egyptian sun. As the procession moves through the crowded, narrow streets of Cairo, something incredible begins to happen. Mansa Musa begins to give his gold away. It starts with the royal officials and emirs sent by the Sultan to greet him. Musa presents them with gifts of such magnificence that they are left speechless. We're not talking about a few gold coins. We're talking about heavy sacks of gold dust, intricate golden jewelry, and robes embroidered with gold thread. But it doesn't stop with the officials. As he rides through the city, he sees the poor, the sick, and the holy men who line the streets. He gestures to his attendants, who carry open sacks of gold dust. They scoop up handfuls of the glittering powder and toss it into the crowds. A shower of gold rains down on the people of Cairo. Pandemonium erupts. People scramble, shout, and push to collect the precious dust from the streets. He stops at the city's great mosques, like the Al-Azhar, and makes enormous donations to the imams and scholars. He visits the markets and buys goods he doesn't need at exorbitant prices, paying in pure gold. If a merchant tells him a silk carpet is worth 1,000 dinars, he pays 2,000, not out of foolishness, but as a statement. He is showing that his wealth is so vast that the normal rules of commerce do not apply to him. You follow in the wake of this golden hurricane. The atmosphere in the city is electric, a mixture of awe, disbelief, and naked opportunism. Every merchant, every beggar, every citizen of Cairo wants to catch a glimpse of this West African king and, hopefully, catch some of his falling gold. One of the most famous stories from this period, recorded by the scholar Al-Umari who spoke to Cairenes years after the visit, perfectly captures Mus's attitude. A court official, trying to explain the concept of value to the Mansa, told him that a certain property in the city was worth a huge sum. Mansa Musa, without even looking at the property, simply replied, "I will buy it." He was ready to purchase anything and everything, his generosity a force of nature. You witness a specific, telling incident. A woman whose husband had been wronged by one of the Mansa's guards approaches the royal entourage, shouting for justice. The guards try to push her away, but Musa stops them. He listens to her complaint patiently. Then, He not only punishes the guard but compensates the woman and her husband with an amount of gold that instantly makes them one of the wealthiest families in their neighborhood. News of his justice and his generosity spreads as fast as the news of his wealth. This isn't just random spending. It's a carefully crafted image. He is presenting himself as the ideal Muslim ruler, pious, just, and generous to a fault. However, there's a quirky, almost comical side to this display. The Cairenes, who thought they had seen everything, are completely flummoxed. They don't know what to make of this king who treats gold like dirt. Is he a saint or a fool? Historians still analyze the motives behind this extraordinary behavior. Was it pure piety? A calculated diplomatic strategy to impress the powerful Mamluk Sultan? Or was it, as some have suggested, the ultimate act of what we might today call flex culture? Perhaps it was a combination of all three. He was securing his legacy, performing his religious duty, and ensuring that no one, from Cairo to Damascus, would ever forget the name Mansa Musa. The entire city becomes a giant festival. The Mansa has rented dozens of houses and palaces for his entourage, paying for them with staggering amounts of gold. His cooks distribute free food to the poor. His musicians play in the public squares. For a few glorious weeks, Cairo is caught in a golden delirium, a citywide party funded by a seemingly bottomless purse. The name Mansa Musa is no longer a rumor from a distant land. It is a legend being written in real time on the streets of the city, in shimmering, unforgettable gold dust, while the common people of Cairo are being showered with gold. A more delicate and high-stakes drama is unfolding at the highest levels of power. This is the official meeting between the two great sovereigns, Mansa Musa, the King of Gold, and Al-Nasir Muhammad, the Mamluk Sultan of Egypt and Syria. The encounter is a masterclass in protocol, pride, and subtle power plays. The Sultan summons Mansa Musa to the citadel of Cairo, a massive fortified complex that serves as both a royal residence and the seat of government. You manage to gain access to the outer courts, watching the proceedings from a distance. The air is thick with tension. The Mamluk court is famously rigid and hierarchical, and they are unsure how to treat this powerful but, in their eyes, provincial king from the south. The first point of contention arises immediately. According to Mamluk court etiquette, any person granted an audience with the Sultan is required to prostrate themselves and kiss the ground before his throne. It is a sign of submission to the Sultan's supreme authority in this part of the Islamic world. When Mansa Musa arrives, he is informed of this custom, and he refuses. His refusal sends a shockwave through the court officials. It is a serious breach of protocol, an insult to the Sultan. But Musa is firm. He explains, through his translators, that he is a pilgrim of God and he will only prostrate himself before Allah. You will not bow to any man. For a moment, a major diplomatic incident seems imminent. This is the moment that historians, relying on the accounts of al-Umarai, love to dissect. Was this an act of pious conviction or a savvy political move? By refusing to bow, Musa was implicitly stating that he saw himself as the Sultan's equal, not his vassal. He was the ruler of a sovereign and powerful empire, and he would be treated as such. It was a bold declaration of independence on the world stage. A frantic, whispered negotiation takes place between the Emir S&M US as advisors. Finally, a compromise is reached. It's a classic face-saving solution. Mansa Musa agrees to prostrate himself, but he declares loudly, for all to hear, that he is doing so for God who created me, not for the Sultan. With that clarification made, he performs a gesture, satisfying protocol while maintaining his own dignity. The crisis is averted. With the initial tension eased, the Sultan, Al-Nasir Muhammad, receives him. The Sultan himself is a fascinating character. He has been on and off the throne 3 times, a survivor of ruthless Mamluk power struggles. He is a great builder and a patron of the arts, but he is also a shrewd and experienced politician who understands power. He greets Musa with courtesy and respect. The two kings, through their interpreters, exchange pleasantries and gifts. Musa presents the Sultan with a treasure trove of gold, 40,000 dinars worth, according to some sources, an absolutely staggering sum. The Sultan, in return, presents Musa with fine Arabian horses, robes of honor, and opens up his royal palaces and stables for the Malian entourage. You can sense the mutual curiosity and respect between the two men. Al-Nasir Muhammad is fascinated by this king from Ol and his maps barely chart, a land of seemingly infinite wealth. Mansa Musa, in turn, is impressed by the sophistication, military might, and cultural richness of the Mamluk court. One of the funnier, more humanizing anecdotes from this visit involves the Sultan's attempts to persuade Musa to meet him. Initially, Musa was reluctant, sending a message saying, "I came for the pilgrimage, and nothing else." The Sultan had to send his top emirs repeatedly to coax the Malian king, who kept making excuses. This royal hard-to-get game was another subtle way for Musa to assert his importance. He wasn't just another visiting dignitary who would come running when the Sultan called. He would come in his own time. The meeting is a success. The Sultan grants Mansa Musa and his entire caravan safe passage through his territories to Mecca. He provides them with supplies and logistical support. The two rulers establish a relationship of mutual respect that will have long-lasting consequences, opening up diplomatic and trade channels between Mali and Egypt that would last for generations. As Mansa Musa leaves the citadel, you see a subtle shift in the way he is perceived. He is no longer just a bizarrely generous curiosity. He has met with the most powerful ruler in the region and held his own. He has established himself and his empire as a serious player on the world stage. The King of Gold has proven that he also has a spine of iron. The initial, flashy display of wealth has been backed up by a demonstration of shrewd diplomacy and unwavering pride. Having established diplomatic credentials with the Sultan, Mansa Musa and his court settle in Cairo for a stay of several months while waiting for the main Hajj caravan to assemble. And it is during this extended stay that the true, earth-shattering economic impact of his generosity is felt. This is the moment that would cement his legend for centuries to come. The process is gradual at first, then catastrophic. It begins with the constant, steady stream of gold flowing out from the Malian camp into the city's economy. Every day, the man's entourage spends lavishly. They buy food, spices, textiles, perfumes, horses, and property. They don't haggle. They pay whatever price is asked. And often, they pay more. Then there is the Sahara, the charitable giving. Musa continues his daily practice of distributing gold dust to the poor and to religious institutions. The sheer volume of this charity is unlike anything the city has ever experienced. The beggars of Cairo suddenly find themselves with more gold than they know what to do with. The initial reaction in the city as markets is euphoria. Merchants and artisans are making fortunes. Business is booming. Everyone has gold. But then, a fundamental law of economics begins to assert itself. When a commodity becomes too plentiful, its value drops. You start to see the first signs in the souk, the great marketplace of Khan el-Khalili. A merchant who a month ago would have sold a bolt of silk for 10 gold dinars now finds that his customers, flush with Malian gold, are willing to pay 20. So he raises his price. But so does the merchant next to him, and the one next to him. Prices for goods begin to inflate rapidly. But the real problem is with the value of gold itself. Gold was the basis of the entire region's monetary system. The gold dinar was the standard currency, valued against the silver dirham. Suddenly, gold is everywhere. It's no longer scarce. People are using it to buy everyday items. The bag of flour, which might have cost a few silver coins, is now being paid for with a pinch of gold dust. The result is that the value of gold plummets. The exchange rate between the gold dinar and the silver dirham is thrown into chaos. According to al-Umarai, the price of gold in Cairo fell cheap. The value of the dinar dropped by as much as 20-25%, a catastrophic devaluation. Imagine waking up one day and finding that the money in your pocket is suddenly worth a quarter less than it was yesterday. That is what happened to the entire city of Cairo. The salaries of soldiers and government officials, paid in gold, could now buy less. The savings of wealthy merchants, stored in gold, had shrunk. The entire economic structure of the most powerful city in the Middle East was destabilized. It's a historical event so dramatic it almost sounds like a fable. But contemporary Arab chroniclers were clear and specific about the consequences. They state that the Cairo gold market was in a state of depression for more than a decade after Mus's visit. He had, through pure, unadulterated generosity, single-handedly crashed the economy of the medieval world's leading commercial center. There's a debate among historians about Mus's intentions. Was he economically naive? A man from an empire where gold was as common as stone, who simply didn't understand the concept of supply and demand in a market-based economy like Cairo's? Or was this an intentional, albeit destructive, display of power? Some scholars argue for the former, painting him as an unsophisticated ruler overwhelmed by the complex markets of Egypt. Others argue for the latter, suggesting that devaluing the Sultan's own currency was the ultimate power move, a way of saying, "Your most precious substance is my pocket chain." The truth is likely somewhere in the middle, a combination of religious fervor, political calculation, and a genuine unfamiliarity with the economic consequences of his actions. You wander through the streets of Cairo and see the effects firsthand. In the money Camberg stalls, there is confusion and anger. Merchants are arguing with customers over the true value of their gold. You overhear a conversation between two weavers complaining that the price of thread has doubled, but the value of the gold they are paid with has fallen, crushing their profits. Mansa Musa, in his desire to show the world the wealth of Mali, has given Cairo a lesson in economics it will never forget. He has weaponized generosity, whether he intended to or not. The river of gold that flowed out of the Sahara has become a flood, breaking the financial levees of the city and leaving economic chaos in its wake. This, more than any other single act, is what made his name echo through history. He was the man who was so rich, he could make gold worthless. You decide to step away from the grand narrative of kings and economies and immerse yourself in the streets of Cairo to gauge the mood of the common people. The city is a hive of gossip, and the name Musa is on everyone's tongue. The conversations you overhear in tea houses, at public fountains, and in the bustling alleyways of the souk paint a vivid, contradictory picture of the Malian's visit. In a smoky corner of a coffee house, a relatively new and trendy institution in 14th century Cairo, a group of merchants are locked in a heated debate. An older, portly spice trader is fuming. "He has ruined us," he declares, slamming his fist on the table. "My gold, my savings from 20 years of hard work, is now worth less than the dust on my shoes. I sell my pepper for twice the price, but the gold I receive buys me half of what it used to." It's a curse dressed as a blessing. A younger textile merchant counters him, his eyes still shining with excitement. "Hey, curse, I sold every bolt of damask I owned in a week. I have enough gold now to buy a new workshop and 3 new looms. Yes, the value is less, but the volume. I have never seen such a flow of wealth. This king is a gift from Allah." This is the central paradox you find everywhere. For every person who was financially harmed by the devaluation, savers, people on fixed incomes, money Cambergs, there is someone who benefited immensely. The artisans who sold their wares, the property owners who rented out their homes, the food vendors who supplied the massive caravan, they all reaped a golden harvest. The city is divided between those who see Musa as an economic storm, those who see him as a rainmaker. You wander down to the slave market, a far more somber place. Here, the story is different. Mansa Musa and his nobles, as a sign of their piety and wealth, have been buying slaves and immediately setting them free, a practice highly praised in Islam. You speak to a man who was, just a week ago, a captive from the lands of Nubia. He is now a free man, clutching a small pouch of gold dust given to him by a Malian courtier. He has tears in his eyes. To him, Mansa Musa is not an economic force. He is a liberator, a saint, He did not see me as property. The man tells you, his voice thick with emotion. He saw me as a soul to be saved. The oddest and most humorous stories are about the cultural clashes. The Malian-esque customs are a source of endless fascination and sometimes ridicule for the sophisticated Cairenes. You hear a group of women laughing by a well. One is imitating the way the Malian noble women dress. Their grand, flowing boa is so different from the more fitted Egyptian garments. Another topic is the Malian custom of pouring dust on their heads as a sign of respect. When some of Mus's courtiers performed this act in the Sultan's court, the Mamluk emirs were, according to one gossiping official you overhear, appalled and amused in equal measure. To the Egyptians, it looked like a bizarre and primitive ritual, completely at odds with the immense wealth and power the Malianes displayed. This disconnect between their customs and their gold is a constant source of chatter. The culinary differences are also a hot topic. The Malianes, used to a diet based on millet, sorghum, and grilled meats, are introduced to the complex, heavily spiced stews and rice dishes of Egypt. Some love it. Others, you hear, have been spending fortunes trying to find merchants who can supply them with the familiar grains of home. A baker tells you he made a small fortune selling simple, unleavened millet bread to a group of Malian soldiers who were tired of the rich Egyptian yeast breads. One area where there is no debate is Mus's piety. The Cairenes are deeply impressed by his devotion. He and his entourage attend prayers 5 times a day. Without fail, he has endowed mosques, funded Quranic schools, and spent hours in the company of the city's most respected theologians. Even the cynical spice merchant has to admit it. The man may be a fool with his money. He grumbles, but his faith is pure. I will grant him that. The figure of Mansa Musa has become larger than life. He is a folk hero to some, a villain to others. He is a pious pilgrim, a liberator of slaves, a financial disruptor, and a cultural curiosity. The stories about him are already taking on the quality of legend. People claim his golden staffs were so heavy they required 2 men to lift. They whisper that he never slept in the same house twice. The historical reality of the man is being replaced by a myth forged in the crucible of Cairo's streets. And it is this myth, as much as the economic data, that will be his most enduring legacy from this part of the journey. As the months in Cairo pass, you begin to notice a different kind of activity emanating from the Malian camp. It's quieter, more strategic, and in the long run, perhaps more significant than the spectacular, chaotic distribution of gold. Mansa Musa is not just spending his wealth. He is investing it. He is on a shopping spree. But he's not just buying goods. He's buying human talent. His ultimate goal has always been more than just completing the Hajj. It is to transform his own empire, to elevate it into a world-class center of Islamic culture and learning. He knows that gold can build palaces, but only knowledge can build a civilization. And so, he sets out to recruit the brightest minds in the Mamluk Sultanate. You see his emissaries, armed with pouches of golden promises of immense prestige, moving through the city's intellectual centers. They are a constant presence at Al-Azhar University, one of the oldest and most respected centers of learning in the world. They approach architects, doctors, poets, astronomers, and, most importantly, scholars of Islamic law and theology. The offer is incredibly tempting. Come to Mali, they say. Come to the court of the great Mansa Musa. You will be given a position of immense honor. You will have a palace, servants, and a salary that will make you one of the wealthiest men in your field. You will have the resources to build, to write, to teach, to create whatever you desire. You will help us build a new Athens of West Africa on the banks of the Niger River. For many Cairene scholars and artists, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. While Cairo is a great center of learning, it is also an old one, with established hierarchies and intense competition for patronage. Mali is a new frontier, a place where a man of talent can make a name for himself under the patronage of a king who seems to have limitless resources and ambition. The most famous of these recruits, the one whose name would become inextricably linked with MUS as, is an architect and poet from Al-Andalus, the Muslim-controlled region of Spain. His name is Abu Ishaq al-Sayshali. Al-Sayshali was living in Cairo at the time, already a respected figure known for his knowledge of the sophisticated architectural styles of Granada and Morocco. You witness the meeting between Musa and al-Sayshali. The Mansa is clearly impressed by the architect's worldliness and his grand ideas. Musa doesn't just want mosques. He wants magnificent mosques. He wants buildings that will rival the great structures of Cairo and Damascus. El-Sayshali, seeing a patron who matches his own ambition, agrees to enter the Mansa's service. The deal is sealed, according to the chroniclers, with a staggering payment of somewhere between 40, 0 and 200 mithqls of gold. A fortune by any standard. The exact amount is one of those details lost to historical exaggeration, but all sources agree it was an enormous sum. But al-Sayshali is not the only one. Musa also recruits a host of jurists from the Maliki school of Islamic law, which was the dominant school in both North and West Africa. This was a strategic move. By bringing these experts back to Mali, he could standardize and strengthen the application of Islamic law throughout his vast and diverse empire, reinforcing his authority as a legitimate Muslim ruler. You also see him collecting books. He and his scholars visit the city's booksellers and libraries, purchasing hundreds of manuscripts. They acquire seminal texts on law, theology, history, medicine, and astronomy. Each book is a treasure, worth a small fortune, and has to be carefully packed for the long journey ahead. He is not just building a library. He is importing the foundational knowledge of the entire Islamic world. This talent acquisition is a far more subtle display of power than showering the streets with gold. It's a statement that Mali is not just a source of raw materials, but a future destination for high culture. It shows a level of foresight and a strategic vision that many of the Cairene elite likely didn't expect from the king of the bush. The academic world still debates the long-term impact of this brain drain. How many scholars actually made the journey? How much did they truly influence West African culture, versus being absorbed by it? While al-Sayshali's contributions are well documented, the impact of the many nameless others is harder to trace. It was likely a two-way street, with the new arrivals both influencing and being influenced by the vibrant intellectual traditions that already existed in places like Timbuktu. As the time for departure to Mecca approaches, the caravan is now laden with a new kind of treasure. Alongside the sacks of gold are chests of precious books, and interspersed among the soldiers and servants are some of the sharpest minds of their generation. Mansa Musa came to Cairo and gave away a fortune in gold, but in exchange, he is taking something far more valuable back home with him, the seeds of a renaissance. The time has finally come. The Great Hajj caravan, the main pilgrimage procession to Mecca, is ready to depart from Cairo. This is a massive annual event, drawing pilgrims from all across North Africa and the Middle East. But this year, it is different. It is utterly dominated by the presence of Mansa Musa and his spectacular retinue. Your caravan, which has been camped on the outskirts of Cairo for months, now merges with the larger procession. If you thought your group of 60, Daru was large, the combined force is a staggering river of humanity. It is a slow, ponderous, and yet majestic movement, kicking up a cloud of dust that can be seen for miles. The mood of the journey has shifted dramatically. The leg from Mali to Cairo was a voyage of announcement, a declaration of wealth and power to the world. This leg, from Cairo to Mecca, is more solemn, more focused on the spiritual purpose of the journey. The ostentatious displays of gold are toned down, though the sheer scale of MUS's entourage is still a spectacle in itself. The focus is no longer on impressing emirs and merchants, but on preparing the soul for the sacred rites of the Hajj. You travel eastward from Cairo, leaving the green, fertile Nile Valley behind and entering the harsh, unforgiving landscape of the Sinai Peninsula. This is a holy land, a landscape imbued with religious significance. You pass near places mentioned in the Quran and the Bible, the lands where Moses received the commandments, the wilderness where the Israelites wandered. For the pilgrims, Every mountain and every valley is a reminder of the long history of their faith. The journey across the Sinai is arduous, a return to the hardships of the Sahara, though on a shorter scale. The logistics are managed by the Mamluk Sultan, who has a vested interest in ensuring the safety of this vital pilgrimage route. Forts and wells are maintained along the path, providing a degree of security and sustenance that was absent in the vast emptiness of the Trans-Saharan crossing. You observe Mansa Musa during this part of the journey. He seems more introspective, spending more time in prayer and in consultation with the theologians he has brought with him from Mali and those he recruited in Cairo. He is no longer the flamboyant showman of Cairo. He is a pilgrim, preparing himself for the most important spiritual experience of his life. The caravan travels along the well-established pilgrimage route, the Darbi al-Hajj al-Misri. You cross the Sinai and then travel down the western coast of the Arabian Peninsula, a rugged, mountainous region. The Red Sea is a constant, shimmering blue presence to your right. One of the more interesting and less discussed aspects of the Hajj is its role as a massive cultural and intellectual exchange. It was the original globalization event of the medieval Muslim world. As you sit around the campfires at night, you meet people from every corner of the known world. You share food with a scholar from Persia, listen to a poet from Andalusia, and trade stories with a merchant from the Swahili coast. You learn about different customs, different interpretations of the faith, and different political realities. For many of the Malians in your caravan, this is an eye-opening experience, expanding their understanding of the sheer diversity of the Ummah, the global community of Muslims. There is, of course, a debate among historians about how solemn this part of the journey truly was. While the primary sources emphasize the piety, a procession of this size and wealth could not have been entirely without its luxuries and its political maneuverings. Musa was still a king, and his entourage still required immense logistical support. It's likely that the core of the caravan, centered around the Mansa, became more devout, while the outer rings of merchants and soldiers continued their daily business. You also witnessed the ever-present danger of the journey. The Bedouin tribes of the Arabian Peninsula, while respecting the Hajj, were not above raiding smaller, unprotected groups of pilgrims or demanding tolls for safe passage through their territories. The massive, well-armed Mamluk and Malian contingent of your caravan provides a powerful deterrent, and your passage is largely peaceful. But you see smaller, independent groups of pilgrims gratefully attaching themselves to your procession for safety. Finally, after weeks of travel, you approach the holy city. The landscape becomes even more barren and rocky, a series of stark, brown mountains. There is a sense of mounting anticipation in the air. The chatter in the caravan dies down, replaced by chants and prayers. The pilgrims begin to perform the rituals of purification, preparing to enter the sacred space. You are leaving the temporal world behind. You left the chaos of Cairo, a city obsessed with golden commerce. You have crossed a desert imbued with prophetic history. No, you are approaching the very heart of Islam, the destination that has been the singular goal of this epic, year-long journey. The river of gold has crossed deserts and continents, and it is now about to pour itself out at the feet of God. The moment of arrival is not marked by a grand gate or a triumphal arch. It is a feeling, a shift in the spiritual atmosphere. As the caravan crests a final, rocky hill, you get your first glimpse of Mecca, nestled in a barren, rocky valley. It is not a large or imposing city in the manner of Cairo. Its significance is not in its size, but in its sacredness. For the tens of thousands of pilgrims in your caravan, this is the center of the world. A wave of emotion ripples through the crowd. After months, or in your case, nearly a year of travel, the destination is finally in sight. People weep openly. They fall to their knees in prayer, their foreheads touching the rocky ground. The hardships of the journey, the thirst, the heat, the sandstorms, the exhaustion, all melt away in this one overwhelming moment of arrival. The caravan does not enter the city as a single entity. The pilgrims break into smaller groups, each finding their lodging and preparing for the sacred rites. Mansa Musa and his royal court have had lavish accommodations arranged for them by his advance envoys, who have been in the city for weeks, spending liberally. The man's wealth once again smooths the path, ensuring his stay is comfortable. But the mood is entirely different from the flamboyant display in Cairo. Here, the gold is used for logistics and charity, not for show. You follow the crowds towards the heart of the city, the destination of every pilgrim, the great mosque, the Masjid al-Haram. As you pass through its gates, you enter a vast, open-air courtyard. Then there, in the center, stands the Kaaba. It is a simple, perfect tube, about 40 feet high, draped in a magnificent black silk cloth embroidered with gold thread. The Kaaba. It is not grand or ornate in the way a cathedral might be, but its stark, powerful simplicity is mesmerizing. This is the direction that every Muslim in the world, including you and the thousands in your caravan, has faced during their daily prayers. To see it in person is a profoundly moving experience. The courtyard is a swirling vortex of humanity. Pilgrims from every race and nation on earth are circling the Kaaba, a ritual known as the Tawaf. They are dressed in the simple, seamless white robes of the Iram, which strips away all signs of rank, wealth, and nationality. The king and the commoner, the rich merchant and the poor farmer, are indistinguishable, all equal in the eyes of God. You watch as Mansa Musa, the fabulously wealthy emperor, sheds his royal robes and golden skullcap for the same simple white cloth as everyone else. He is no longer the Mansa of Mali. He is just another pilgrim, another soul seeking grace. He joins the river of humanity circling the Kaaba, his face a mask of intense, focused devotion. The 500 slaves with their golden staffs are nowhere to be seen. The pomp and circumstance have been left at the city gates. Over the next few days, you participate in the rites of the Hajj alongside the other pilgrims. You perform the Say, hurrying 7 times between the small hills of Safa and Marwa, reenacting the story of Hagar searching for water for her son, Ishmael. You travel to the plain of Arafat, a few miles outside Mecca, where you spend a full day in prayer and contemplation, standing before God to seek His forgiveness. This is the spiritual climax of the Hajj. One of the lesser-known but fascinating aspects of the Hajj is its economic dimension within Mecca itself. While the pilgrims are focused on spirituality, the city of Mecca thrives on their presence. It is a temporary marketplace of incredible diversity. Merchants sell everything from holy water from the Zamzam well to exotic spices from the East Indies. Pilgrims from distant lands trade goods they have carried with them. A Malian might trade gold dust for Chinese porcelain. A Persian might trade a fine carpet for Indian steel. The Hajj is a spiritual event, but it is also the greatest international trade fair of the medieval world. Historians often debate the balance between the sacred and the profane in Mecca, but most agree they were inextricably linked. During his time in Mecca, the nearby city of Medina, Mansa Musa continues his acts of immense charity, but with a different tone. He distributes fortunes in gold to the Sharifes of Mecca, the descendants of the Prophet who governed the holy cities, and to the poor and the scholars. It is recorded that he gave so much that every single pilgrim who had traveled from his empire to Mecca that year had their expenses paid and received a gift of gold. He is cementing his reputation not as a showman, but as a true patron of the faith. You see him, away from the crowds, sitting in quiet contemplation in the courtyard of the Prophet's mosque in Medina. The journey's ultimate purpose has been fulfilled. He has prayed at the center of his universe. He has walked in the footsteps of the Prophet. He has washed away his sins on the plains of Arafat. The king who left Mali to show the world his wealth has now laid that wealth at the feet of his Creator, and in doing so, has achieved the spiritual goal that set this entire epic journey in motion. The days in Mecca and Medina are a blur of sacred rituals and deep spiritual immersion. Having completed the core tenets of the Hajj, a different side of Mansa Musa becomes more apparent. The grand, imperial persona has been almost entirely set aside, replaced by a man humbled and transformed by the spiritual intensity of the holy cities. You observe him in moments when the crowds have thinned, perhaps in the cool of the late evening in the courtyard of the Masjid al-Haram, He is no longer surrounded by a phalanx of guards or fawning courtiers. He often sits with a small circle of theologians, including the new scholars he recruited in Cairo. Their discussions are not about statecraft or finance, but about the finer points of Islamic jurisprudence and theology. He is like a student, asking questions with genuine curiosity. He wants to know how to be a better, more just ruler according to the strictest interpretations of Sharia law. He inquires about the proper way to fund public works, how to structure a legal system that is both fair and pious, and how to promote education throughout his empire. This is the intellectual shopping spree you witnessed in Cairo now being put to use. He is absorbing knowledge, gathering the ideological framework for the next phase of his reign. One evening, you see him performing a personal, quiet act of devotion. He is helping to sweep a portion of the floor of the great mosque, a task usually reserved for the mosque's humble servants. For a man who commands an empire built on gold, the act of picking up a simple broom is a powerful statement. It's a performance of humility, a demonstration that in this sacred space, he is no greater than the lowliest servant of God. This act, whether genuinely felt or strategically performed, would have been deeply impressive to the other pilgrims who witnessed it. There is a fascinating historical debate surrounding Musa's interactions with the Sharifas of Mecca. The official accounts, both Malian and Arab, portray a relationship of immense generosity and mutual respect. Musa gave them fortunes in gold, and they honored him as a great Muslim king. However, some modern historians speculate about the underlying politics. Was Musa's generosity also a form of soft power, an attempt to buy influence in the very heart of the Islamic world? By becoming the greatest patron of the holy cities, he elevated his own status and that of his empire. The academic question isn't whether he was generous, but what the political and diplomatic dividends of that generosity were. You also see the impact of the Hajj on the thousands of other Malianese. They are transformed. They have seen the incredible diversity of the Muslim world. They have met people from Andalusia, Persia, India, and beyond. Their worldview has been irrevocably expanded. They have a new sense of their place within the global Islamic community. They will return home not just as people who have completed a pilgrimage, but as carriers of new ideas, new customs, and a new, more cosmopolitan perspective. A particularly quirky and humanizing detail you notice is the souvenir shopping. Like pilgrims of any era, the Malianese are keen to bring back mementos from the Holy Land. They buy prayer beads, vials of water from the Zamzam well, and prayer rugs. But being Malianese from the court of Mansa Musa, they do it on a grand scale. You see courtiers haggling for entire shipments of incense, fine perfumes, and illustrated copies of the Quran. The return journey will be as much about transporting holy relics and scholarly books as it will be about transporting the people themselves. As the time to leave Mecca approaches, there is a final, significant ceremony. Mansa Musa gathers all the pilgrims who came from his empire. He thanks them for undertaking the journey with him and for their devotion. Then, he once again opens his treasury. He announces that the expenses for every single one of their return journeys will be covered. No one who came with him will return home in debt. It is an act of incredible largesse that cements their loyalty and adoration. You watch him as he takes one last look at the Kaaba. His face is serene. He came here as a king seeking to fulfill a religious duty. He showered the cities with gold, impressing and disrupting in equal measure. But here, in the quiet moments of prayer and study, he seems to have found something more valuable. He has redefined his own kingship, grounding it not just in the material wealth of his minds, but in the spiritual and intellectual wealth of his faith. The emperor is ready to go home, but the man who returns will not be the same one who left. The return journey begins. The great caravan turns its back on the holy cities and faces the long road west. The mood is different now, less anticipatory, more reflective. The spiritual climax is over, and the mundane reality of travel sets in once again. But soon, a new and entirely unexpected problem begins to surface, a problem that seems utterly absurd given the context of the entire journey. Mansa Musa is running out of money. It sounds impossible. How could the man who single-handedly devalued gold in Cairo, the man whose wealth was legendary from the Sahara to the Hijaz, be short on cash? But as you piece together the situation, it starts to make a strange kind of sense. The expenses of the past year have been astronomical, beyond any reasonable calculation. Think of the logistics, paying on feeding an army of 60 Dairo people for over a year, the lavish gifts to the Sultan and his emirs in Cairo, the fortunes distributed in charity on the streets, in the mosques, and to the holy men, the cost of renting palaces and homes for his entire entourage for months, the huge sums paid to recruit scholars like El-Seshoi, and finally, the immense donations to the Sharifess of Mecca and the promise to pay for the return journey of every pilgrim from his empire. He had been spending gold as if it were infinite. Then now, the bottom of the treasury was becoming visible. The river of gold had finally flooded its own banks and was running dry. You first noticed the signs in small ways. The casual, showy acts of generosity stop. The daily distributions of gold dust to the camp followers become less frequent, then cease altogether. The merchants who supply the caravan are no longer paid an exorbitant price. Now, they have to haggle, and sometimes they are asked to extend credit, a concept that would have been laughable just a few months prior. A sense of anxiety begins to ripple through the caravan. The soldiers and courtiers, accustomed to their lavish travel budget, start to grumble. They are still a long way from home, with the vast and dangerous Sahara still to cross. The situation comes to a head as the caravan makes its way back towards Cairo. Mansa Musa, the king of gold, is forced to do the unthinkable. He needs to take out a loan. It is a moment of profound irony. He sends his emissaries to the very same merchants on moneylenders in Cairo and other Egyptian cities that he had showered with wealth on his way in. He approaches the Genoese and Venetian traders who operate in the ports, men who are masters of international finance. The scene is almost comical in its reversal of fortune. The moneylenders, who had watched in awe as this king treated gold like sand, are now in the position of power. They, of course, agree to lend him the money. They are businessmen, and the Mansa of Moi, despite his current cash flow problem, is still the best creditress in the world. He literally sits on a mountain of the stuff back home, but they drive a hard bargain. They charge him an exorbitant rate of interest. The exact figures are not recorded, but the chroniclers make it clear that the terms were not favorable. The man who had disrupted their market with his endless supply of gold was now being forced to buy it back at a premium. This episode is a source of great debate among historians. Was this a genuine financial crisis, or was there something else at play? Some argue it was a real, if temporary, embarrassment. A classic case of a fabulously wealthy individual who is house-rich, cash-poor. His assets were back in Mali, but his liquid currency was exhausted. Other, more cynical historians have proposed a different theory. They suggest this might have been another, even more sophisticated, economic maneuver. By borrowing huge sums of gold at a high interest rate, was he deliberately trying to drive the price of gold back up? Was this his way of trying to fix the market he had broken? The academic consensus generally leans towards a genuine, if temporary, cash shortage, but the market manipulation theory is a tantalizing possibility. You see the gold flowing back into the Malian camp, but this time it is not from their own sacks. It comes from the coffers of canny merchants who are making the deal of a lifetime. The sight is a humbling one. The golden tide, which had flowed out so magnificently, is now being forced back in by the gravitational pull of debt. The king of gold has learned a harsh lesson in practical economics. Wealth is not just about how much you have, but about how you manage it. As the caravan prepares to leave Egypt for the final, arduous leg of the journey home, it is solvent once again, but its leader's aura of infinite, effortless wealth has been tarnished. He is no longer a mythical figure with a bottomless purse, but a mortal king who has to balance his books, with his treasury replenished by the high-interest loans from Cairo's merchants. Mansa Musa leads his caravan out of Egypt for the final time. As he retraces his steps, a new, audacious plan begins to take shape. It's one thing to borrow money to get your people home. It's another thing entirely to try to actively repair the economic chaos you've created. Upon his first arrival in Cairo, he had acted like a force of nature, a golden flood that overwhelmed the market. Now, on his return, he attempts to act like a central banker, performing what might be the first ever large-scale quantitative tightening in history. He begins to borrow even more gold from the Cairene lenders, but he does it in a highly visible, strategic way. He is deliberately taking so much gold out of circulation that he creates scarcity. The merchants, who just months ago were swimming in gold, now find that the biggest buyer in the world is sucking it all up. The effect is the exact opposite of what happened on his first visit. With gold suddenly becoming scarcer again, its value begins to rise. The exchange rate between the gold dinar and the silver dirham, which had been wrecked, starts to stabilize. The prices of goods, which had been wildly inflated, begin to creep back down to their normal levels. It is a stunning, unprecedented act of market manipulation. You watch as MUS's financial officers negotiate massive loans, paying ridiculously high interest rates without blinking. They are not just buying passage home, they are buying back the stability of the entire region's economy. The Arab chronicler Al-Jumurai, who documented this whole affair, was in awe. He wrote that MUS's actions profited the Egyptians by many times what he had given them. The lenders who had risked loaning him money were now making immense fortunes on the interest. The value of the gold that the citizens held was restored. In a bizarre turn of events, the man who broke the economy became the man who fixed it, and in the process, made the local financiers incredibly rich. Historians are fascinated by this episode. It raises so many questions about MUS's character and intentions. The debate about his economic naivety versus his shrewdness comes into sharp focus here. The naive camp argues that he was simply trying to rectify a mistake he had made out of ignorance. Perhaps guided by his new, more worldly, wise advisors, he felt a responsibility to undo the damage he had caused. The shrewd camp offers a more Machiavellian interpretation. They suggest this was the ultimate power play. First, he showed he was rich enough to destroy their economy. Then, he showed he was rich enough to save it. By doing so, he made the entire financial elite of Cairo dependent on him and indebted to him, both literally and figuratively. He had proven that the economic fate of the Eastern Mediterranean was, in that moment, tied to the whims of the King of Mali. It was a demonstration of economic power far more profound than just handing out free gold. One of the curious side effects of this event was that it put Mali on the financial map of the world. The Genoese Venetian merchants, who had previously only heard vague rumors of a land of gold in the south, now had first-hand experience. They had dealt with its king, they had seen his wealth, and they had profited from his borrowing. This encounter would spur European interest in finding a direct sea route to the source of West African gold, a quest that would ultimately drive the great age of exploration more than a century later. You observe the change in the Cairene elite's attitude towards Musa. The initial amusement and condescension are gone, replaced by a grudging, profound respect. He is not just some provincial king with more gold than sense. He is a force to be reckoned with, a man who can play the complex game of international finance on a continental scale. As the caravan finally leaves the orbit of Egypt and plunges back into the vastness of the Sahara for the last time, it carries with it a new legend. The story is no longer just about the king who gave away so much gold that he devalued it. It's now the story of the king who was so powerful, he could command the value of gold itself, first pushing it down and then pulling it back up. He had left an indelible mark, not just on the streets and mosques of Cairo, but on its very ledgers. The world now knew that the empire of Mali was not just a source of wealth, but a source of economic power unlike any it had ever seen. The final crossing of the Sahara is a grueling, introspective affair. The memory of the sandstorm on the way out, combined with the financial anxieties and the sheer exhaustion of the journey, makes for a somber mood. But as the caravan finally emerges from the desert and re-enters the familiar savanna grasslands of the Sahara, A new energy takes hold. They are home. The journey back through the outer provinces of the Mali Empire is a triumphant procession. News of the man's incredible journey has preceded him. People line the roads, not to beg for gold, but to celebrate the king who has successfully completed the holy pilgrimage and put their empire on the world map. But Mansa Musa's vision is now firmly fixed on the future. He is not content to simply return to his capital and resume his old life. He is a man with a mission, fired up by the splendors he has seen in Cairo and Mecca, and armed with the talent he has recruited and the knowledge he has acquired. He is going to build a new world in West Africa. His primary focus becomes the city of Timbuktu. At the time Musa left for his pilgrimage, Timbuktu was already an important and prosperous trade depot, strategically located on the bend of the Niger River, where the desert meets the fertile waterway. It was a key link in the trans-Saharan trade, but it was not yet the legendary city of myth. Mansa Musa was about to change that. You travel with a man's court to Timbuktu. He pours resources into the city with the same fervor he once poured gold onto the streets of Cairo. But this is a targeted, strategic investment. His goal is to transform Timbuktu into the intellectual and spiritual capital of his empire. The first and most famous project is entrusted to the Andalusian architect he recruited, Abu Ishaq al-Seychelles. Musa commissions him to build a new grand mosque, the Jingyue River Mosque. Al-Seychelles, accustomed to the stone and tile of Spain and Egypt, is faced with a new challenge. The primary building material of the region is mud brick and wood. What emerges is a masterpiece of Sudano-Sahelian architecture. Al-Seychelles combines the traditional building techniques of Mali with the grander design principles he learned in the wider Islamic world. He introduces new techniques, like the use of fired bricks for certain structural elements and a new mud plastering method that gives the walls a smooth, elegant finish. The result is a monumental structure, the largest mud-built mosque in the world at the time, with its characteristic minaret looking like a pyramid of earthen spires. It is a fusion of cultures, a physical manifestation of the journey itself. But the transformation is not just architectural. Alongside the mosque, Musa commissions the construction of a great university, the Sankore University. It is not a university in the modern sense of a single campus, but a collection of independent schools and colleges, each with its own master scholar. The scholars Musa brought back from Egypt and Mecca become the core faculty. The curriculum is broad and sophisticated. It includes Islamic studies, law, and theology, but also medicine, astronomy, mathematics, history, and art. Timbuktu quickly becomes a magnet for scholars and students from all over Africa and the Middle East. One of the most fascinating aspects of this new center of learning is its book trade. The hundreds of manuscripts Musa purchased in Cairo become the foundation of the new libraries. A vibrant industry of scribes and copyists springs up to replicate these texts. Books become one of the most valuable commodities in Timbuktu, often more profitable to trade than any other good except salt and gold. The city becomes famous for its scholars who are not just learned, but also wealthy from the book trade. There is a long-standing academic debate about how much of Timbuktu's golden age was directly attributable to Musa versus how much was a continuation of existing trends. Some historians argue that Timbuktu was already on a path to greatness and Musa simply accelerated the process. Others maintain that his specific, massive injection of resources, talent, and royal prestige was the catalyst that transformed it from a regional trade town into a world-class intellectual center. The consensus is that while the seeds were there, Musa provided the water and sunlight that made them bloom spectacularly. You walk through the bustling streets of the new Timbuktu. You see the Grand Mosque, its earthen walls glowing in the afternoon sun. You see students gathered in the courtyards, debating points of law and philosophy. You see merchants hawking not just salt and gold, but precious, leather-bound books. Mansa Musa has succeeded. He has brought the best of the world he saw back home and used it to create something new and uniquely his own. He had created a new Athens on the banks of the Niger. The story of your incredible journey, a tale that you have now lived from the inside, begins to ripple outwards across the known world. It's carried by the merchants who witnessed the events in Cairo, by the pilgrims who traveled alongside you to Mecca, and by the diplomats and scholars who now correspond with the burgeoning intellectual centers of Mali. The legend of Mansa Musa, the king of gold, spreads far beyond the borders of his own empire. It travels north, across the Mediterranean, carried on the decks of Venetian and Genoese trading ships. The financiers who made a fortune lending money to Musa tell their patrons and partners about the king from Africa whose wealth dwarfed that of any European monarch. They speak of a land where gold is as common as pebbles. These stories, mixing fact with inevitable exaggeration, ignite the imagination of Europe. This is where the story solidifies into an image, a single, powerful depiction that will define Mansa Musa for centuries. In 1375, about half a century after the Great Pilgrimage, a Jewish cartographer from Majorca named Abraham Cresques is commissioned to create a magnificent map of the world for the King of Aragon. This map, known as the Catalan Atlas, is one of the most important and beautiful documents of the medieval era. And there, in the section depicting West Africa, Cresques draws an image that becomes iconic. It is a portrait of a regal, dark-skinned king, seated on a golden throne. He wears a golden crown and holds a golden scepter in one hand. In the other, he holds up a large, gleaming nugget of pure gold, offering it to a Berber trader who approaches on a camel. The caption next to the image reads, "This black lord is called Masmeli, Lord of the Negroes of Guinea. This king is the richest and most noble lord of all this region on account of the abundance of gold which is gathered in his land." This image is a watershed moment. For the first time for many Europeans, a black African ruler is depicted not as a savage or a vassal, but as a powerful, sophisticated, and fabulously wealthy monarch, the equal of any king in Europe. The Catalan Atlas was widely circulated among the elite of Europe, and this image became the definitive representation of West African power and wealth. The academic debate around this image is fascinating. Is it an accurate representation, or a European fantasy of exotic wealth? The consensus is that it's a bit of both. It accurately reflects the source of Mus's fame, his immense gold wealth and his control over the trans-Saharan trade. However, it also filters him through a European lens. The crown, the throne, the scepter, these are symbols of European monarchy, projected onto an African king who likely used very different symbols of power, like the royal parasol and the short bow you saw back in Neon Eye. It's an act of translation, an attempt to make this astonishing African king understandable to a European audience. The legend of Mansa Musa and his golden empire had a profound, long-term effect on European ambitions. It added fuel to the fire of the age of exploration. Portuguese navigators, like Henry the Navigator, who began pushing down the coast of Africa in the 15th century, were driven by multiple motives: a crusading spirit, a desire for new trade routes to India. But the quest for the source of West African gold was a primary and powerful one. They had seen the map. They had heard the stories. They wanted to bypass the Berber middlemen and get directly to the land of the Golden King. A slightly strange and little-known consequence of Mus's fame was the confusion it created. For years, European maps were filled with speculative and often fantastical geography about the interior of Africa. The legendary kingdom of Prester John, a mythical Christian king thought to rule a lost kingdom somewhere in the east, was sometimes conflated with the wealthy empire of Mali. The reality of Mus's power and the myth of Prester John's kingdom swirled together in the European imagination, creating a picture of a continent filled with incredible wealth and mystery. You reflect on the journey's end. The story that began with a rumor in the dusty streets of Neon Eye has now become a fixed point on the maps of the world. Mansa Musa set out on his pilgrimage to fulfill a religious duty and to establish his own legacy. He succeeded beyond his wildest dreams. He had not just put himself on the map. He had redrawn the world's mental map of Africa. He was no longer the ruler of a distant, vaguely understood territory. He was Mansa Musa, the Golden King, a name and an image that would echo through the halls of power, the counting houses of merchants, and the dreams of explorers for centuries to come. Years have passed since the great pilgrimage. You are now an elder, sitting in a quiet courtyard in Timbuktu, the city that has become the crown jewel of the empire. The Jingyui River Mosque stands tall against the sky, a testament to the vision that returned with the caravan. The air hums with the debate of scholars and the rustle of turning pages from the nearby Sanko University. The legacy of the journey is all around you, tangible and vibrant. Mansa Musa ruled for another decade or so after his return, a period that is remembered as the zenith of the Mali Empire's power and prestige. The scholars he brought back trained a new generation of West African intellectuals. The legal frameworks he implemented helped to unify the diverse regions of his empire. The diplomatic ties he forged with Egypt and Morocco opened up new channels for trade and cultural exchange. The Hajj was not an end, but the beginning of a golden age. Yet, as you reflect on the full arc of the story, you perceive a more complex and bittersweet legacy. The very act that broadcast Mali's wealth to the world may have also planted the seeds of its eventual decline. The incredible display of gold had a double-edged effect. While it brought prestige, it also made Mali a target. The stories of its immense wealth, which so captivated European mapmakers, also inflamed the envy of its neighbors. In the decades following MUS's death, the empire faced increasing pressure from rival states, like the rising Songhai Empire to the east and the Mossi kingdoms to the south. They chipped away at Mali's territory, eager to control the trade routes and the sources of wealth that Musa had so famously advertised. There is also a poignant historical debate about the economic consequences within Mali itself. Did MUS's lavish spending abroad, coupled with the immense cost of his building projects at home, place an unsustainable strain on the imperial treasury? Some historians argue that the pilgrimage, for all its glory, was an act of official irresponsibility, a massive capital flight from which the empire's economy never fully recovered. Others contend that the empire's wealth was so vast that it could easily afford the expenditure, and that the decline was due to political factors, not economic ones. As with so many aspects of this story, the truth is likely a complex mixture of both. The empire was certainly weaker politically after Musa, ruled by a succession of less capable leaders who struggled to hold the vast territory together. You think about the nature of wealth itself. The gold of Mali, which had been a source of regional power for centuries, became a global sensation. But in doing so, it lost some of its mystique and, as the Cairenes learned, some of its value. By putting his wealth on display, did Musa paradoxically devalue the very foundation of his empire's power? It's a question without an easy answer. One of the more obscure but telling signs of the shifting fortunes was the fate of the silent trade you witnessed so long ago. As the Mali Empire's central control weakened, and as Portuguese traders began arriving on the coast, offering new goods and new trade routes, the ancient, ritualized system of barter in the forest clearings began to break down. The world was changing, and the old ways of the empire were slowly being eroded. Mansa Musa's personal legacy remains unparalleled. He is still remembered as the richest person in human history, with a fortune so vast that modern economists find it impossible to accurately calculate in today's terms. It was, in a word, incomprehensible. But his true legacy is far more than just a number. It's in the stone and mud of Timbuktu's mosques. It's in the thousands of manuscripts that were copied in its libraries, preserving a vital chapter of human knowledge. It's in the pride and the expanded worldview that his people gained from seeing their king treated as an equal on the world stage. You look up at the setting sun, casting a golden glow over the city. The story of the Great Pilgrimage is now a foundational myth for the empire, told and retold by the JELs every evening. It is a story of faith, of power, of incredible wealth, and of unintended consequences. Mansa Musa set out to find God and to build a name for himself. He succeeded in both, creating a legacy as glittering, as complex, and ultimately, as transient as a shower of gold dust tossed into the wind. The dust of Timbuktu seems to settle gently around you, each particle a tiny speck of history. The heat of the day has softened into a warm, gentle embrace, and the sharp sounds of the city have melted into a lull. Continuous hum. The voices of the scholars in the distance are no longer distinct words, but a soft, melodic murmur, like a river flowing in the dark. The last light of the sun paints the sky in deep, sleepy shades of purple and indigo, and the first stars begin to appear, sharp and clear in the dry desert air. You can almost hear the faint, distant plucking of a kora, a melody that carries not a story, but a feeling of profound peace and finality. The great journey is over. The memories are safe. Your own journey, Dale, is easing into the quiet landscape of dreams. The world of gold and caravans, of deserts and kings, fades away, replaced by the soft, dark comfort of the coming night. There is nothing left to do now but to let go, to drift on this gentle current of sound and memory, down into a deep and restful sleep. The story is finished. It's time to rest.